John Scott, Jonathan Acosta, Vic Carucci here. Day 5 of Bill's training camp in the books, but it's the first day with pads on. We always look forward to this because, frankly, it's really when the evaluation period starts. What did you see from the first day of pads?
I think for me, the player that stood out was Matt Milano. A lot has been made about his recovery from injury. First time in a couple of years where he's not trying to nurse something in training camp or working his way back from something. I think we're finally starting to maybe see that pre-injury Matt Milano that we saw at the beginning of the 2023 season, where he looked en route to maybe another All-Pro selection. One play specifically standing out from this game, from this practice, a swing pass, a screenplay to KJ Hamler. Milano shoots it and brings him down for a tackle for loss. The defense all hyped up. Sean McDermott comes over and gives him a pat on the back. I thought it was a vintage Matt Milano play, and Taron Johnson talking about Matt Milano after practice saying he seems like the guy who he's always been. That was my evaluation from today as well.
No question, Milano looked like Milano, and if we could say that, I think that's a big thing for this team. But what stands out to me is the play selection from an offensive standpoint. This was very intentional to be inside running. And what are inside runs? They're as physical a play as you can get, and it ties right into what Sean McDermott was saying to the media beforehand, wanting to see nastiness, wanting it to be physical. Those were the goals. I would dare say, now maybe afterward he evaluated it differently, but I would dare say that players were trying to meet that messaging, which they heard well before the media heard it. And I think in general, it looked like from a run game standpoint, again, it was not tackling to the ground, but definitely a lot of traffic, a lot of difficulty for those backs to get through there. And I think what also stands out is the size of this defensive line. Maybe the skills we know the skills need to be refined for these younger players that are in the middle of this defense, but that they're definitely creating obstacles for old linemen to push out of the way and for running backs to get through.
For me, it was Christian Benford, and it started for me one-on-ones. He was so physical, whether it was Keon Coleman, KJ Hamler, anyone that lined up against him. Him and Hamler were going literally face-to-face after reps. The intensity was ratcheted up, and I think it goes to a greater thing of, we know the football player of Christian Benford. You want to see his play on the field continue to ascend and match the contract, but I get this sense from just watching him out here that he's also elevating his persona and the feeling of him out there on the field throughout the rest of the defense, saying, I have the paycheck now. I can't just be the quiet assassin, essentially, the set it and forget it corner opposite of a position battle. I also need to be a little more vocal and be the one that the actions match the paycheck as well.
Taron Johnson said it best. He was asked who's sort of brought the swagger on defense, and without missing a beat, he said, Christian Benford, he's a dog. I think he's the best cornerback in football. To the KJ Hamler thing, they had one rep where Benford won it, and then they were jawing at each other. Hamler kind of went up again for his rep, and I think it was going to be someone else's turn. Benford went up and stood in front of him because they were jawing at each other. He wanted that challenge again. I think Hamler, it was either a comeback or a slant, and he ended up making the catch. But to your point, Benford just bringing that energy and physicality, which is exactly what this team wanted to see on this first day of pads.
The other thing while we're talking about that secondary is Cole Bishop. And the communication that is so vital to the entire secondary. Now, we know Taylor Rapp is more that veteran presence and much more, I think, of a leader presence. But Cole Bishop now in year 2, and hearing Taron Johnson talk about how he doesn't have to turn around and ask for things to be repeated or whatever, that it gets through the first time. And that's vital because those messages or those signals go all the way through the secondary. And also watching Bishop and Trey White compete for an interception, a Josh Allen ball that one of them was going to get. They took it away from each other.
Yeah,
but it just shows you that sign of aggressiveness that is ramped up when pads are on.
I want to stay in the secondary and then transition into a wide receiver, because a matchup that I saw, Keon Coleman versus Max Haristston in one-on-ones, and I want to focus on Haristston to start. Physicality is where I think a lot of questions are going to be answered with him. That's where maybe the reason, as great of an athlete with the speed, he fell to nearly the end of the first round here. This is where I think the evaluation, again, takes a step, because you can get away with some things when you're not in pads, but especially going up against a physical wide receiver like Keon Coleman, this is the greatest test for Max Haristston, and at least early on, we don't overreact completely. You kind of see, not kind of, I see the lengths of which that he needs to go forward.
Well, especially when you compare him to the guy who he's battling with, Tre'Davious White. And Tre'Davious White has no issues with the physicality. I think he's still like, Trey White is just a man out there. And Haristston, he's still a young guy. He still needs to develop his body and put on some of that weight. And so, like you said, here with the pads on is where you really begin to see it. And you compare that maybe to Keon Coleman, where maybe his strengths don't play out until we see him in this sort of scenario. So different players can either stand out in pads or can look like they need a little bit more development, like in the case of Haristston.
Yeah, and that's the story of him. It certainly doesn't mean by saying Tre'Davious White is ahead of him or is on track to be the starter at the beginning of the season that Haristston isn't going to work his way into that or perhaps unseat him at some point as a rookie perhaps. But I think the team can be comfortable. This is the key here. Can be comfortable with what it would have in the secondary with Tre'Davious White lined up there. It may get some reaction around the league. Oh man, they have to kind of go back to the bin, so to speak, of a used player that they had here who was once a prominent player to bring back. That's how desperate they are. It's really not that. It's finding someone who fits well, who understands this defense well, which Tre'Davious White does, and then with Haristston developing him along the way. I think this year for Max Haristston has to be about not only up here, the learning process, getting himself comfortable and acclimated with everything he has to do as a pro, but the physicality, develop that, feel more, add more body armor, add more weight and muscle, and it's going to take some time to do that. I think that's been a mission, frankly, guys, since even before the draft.
And that's not to say that you don't see the potential or the flashes with Haristston, because in 11-on-11s there was a play where he was on Khalil Shakir running a deep crosser, and Josh Allen looks for Shakir. The pass is pretty on target, but Haristston, obviously with that speed, able to keep up with Shakir and bat the ball away. Got a nice pat on the back, I think, from Taron Johnson, gave him a nice message. We saw Haristston also spending a lot of time one-on-one with Christian Benford, talking through things and getting some teammate-to-teammate coaching. So I think this is definitely a team that believes in Haristston and sees the flashes and the potential. It just, the growing curve might be a little bit slower than maybe what some had anticipated.
And I'll be interested to see him respond tomorrow for tomorrow's practice, because quite literally, without it going to, he got punched in the mouth. I mean, this is the first time you're going pads in the NFL. And I think it could be a little of a shock to some of these guys, because even playing in the SEC, you're not getting that the way you are even against some of the guys that aren't even going to make this sort of team. So let's see how he takes in what he felt literally today and takes it to tomorrow. Let's move on to Coleman. We didn't do any of this yesterday. You were here, widely regarded as Coleman's best day. You saw it carry over today as well with some moments. And what I think is encouraging about Coleman, day one was a forgettable day for Keon Coleman. Red zone work, which is where really he should thrive. It feels to me he's stacking days, and each day is getting better.
That's right. The last day before they had a little break, an inconsistent day for him. A good start to the day, but then like two bad drops at the end of the day. He tapped his helmet. He was frustrated. And then since then, I think we've seen the two best days from Keon Coleman in any training camp that we've seen out of him. Obviously, yesterday stood out, making plays in all different sorts of situations. Red zone work, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, going up against different defensive backs and making catches. Today, the same thing. We talked about Haristston. He won two different reps on Haristston. One where I think Josh let him high point the ball and he went up and made the catch. Another one where I think it was a double move and he beat Haristston and had a step on him. The pass was just sailed a little bit over him, or else he would have had two really nice reps and catches against Max Haristston. So this is exactly what you want to see. You know the talent's there with Keon Coleman. You know the athleticism is there. We've seen him bulk up muscular-wise. It's can he now go out here on the field and translate that into good play consistently day after day, and it's encouraging again that he's had two consecutive very good practices where he's clearly been the best receiver so far.
I think, which by the way isn't a real high standard. This isn't a team loaded with star receivers. Let's make that clear too. But look, I agree with everything you're saying in terms of what he's done individually to enhance himself and his game, and it wouldn't shock me if after a very poor first week, really, that some soul searching and you want to come back and show and have pride and respond and by the way have conversations with coaches as well. But I also want to credit Joe Brady for some of this, a lot of this. I thought the patterns where we have seen him look his best, Keon Coleman look his best, are those sideline routes, are those, using the border as close as you can. And Josh is a master at putting that ball right where it needs to be, and then relying then on the skill, the size, the strength of Keon Coleman to separate, not separate, but win the battle, win that tight battle at the line. He's got the line as a big help. That's one of his friends, his best friend, and then the other best friend is his size and his strength and his height, his length. And you go against a Max Haristston, a smaller guy, or any other DB. Keon Coleman's got a better chance to succeed there. So I thought a lot of those routes that were called and the plays you're describing were as much the play that you take advantage of his skill versus trying to ask him to just do a straight 9, stretch the defense.
Let's transition to the injury portion of the podcast here, or whatever we're calling this YouTube video. It's really, really long. And I think just generally, even Sean McDermott, hey, you certainly don't want 10 or however many guys of 90 plus already on the mend before the pads even come on. Some more encouraging than others. No Terrell Bernard, no Dorian Williams still, but he's starting to work his way back with the training staff. That has elevated a conversation of Balen Spector and Joe Andreessen, I think, for backup. And
even Shaq Thompson.
And Shaq Thompson coming into there. And I only had on my 53, which this will probably be where I'm wrong the most, I had him keeping 5 linebackers. They might keep 6, and that's where you bring in Shaq Thompson. That's where you bring in Balen Spector. But it looks like Spector versus Andreessen is a big battle for the backup middle linebacker spot.
And yesterday is kind of the day that this first started to stand out to me, because we saw Balen Spector sort of for the first time really start to get a lot of that run with the ones. I think you saw a lot of that today also. I also noticed, maybe it was just the one play that I really paid attention to it, but I think it was a few times, the 3 linebacker set with Milano
with
and
the run
Spector.
heavy stuff they were doing.
Yeah, with the run heavy stuff with Milano and Spector and Thompson. You wonder what that could look like with a healthy Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams alongside Milano. It might be something that we see a little bit more of this year than we have seen in the past out of this defense. But I think that's maybe one of the, in camp there's always sort of an underrated battle that you didn't expect to play out at the beginning, but it starts to play out as camp goes on. I think that battle for the backup middle linebacker spot is going to be something that we're watching. Big
picture look at these injuries, guys, is the volume. That's striking when you're in the double digits with the numbers of players that are not out there. And first day of pads, it's significant that that's the day they're not being put out there, obviously trying to minimize risk, playing the long game always with players' health. But it was after only 4 practices, and it's not like these were intense 4 practices that we watched in non-contact drills. I'm not saying they're not getting work done and guys aren't putting forth effort and running, twisting, turning, all those things that can affect the body beyond contact, but it's still notable. And it's notable that you got some key names involved in this process. The top 2 tight ends on this team in Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, with their respective hurts that are seemingly continuations of what they've had. So that bears watching, because you don't know if these are things that, okay, they'll be good enough to come back to practice maybe as soon as tomorrow or later in the week, or is it something that when they do and then they come back, does it creep up again, and where's that going to go from there? History shows us that can happen. And then Spencer Brown at offensive tackle. I mean, the career was blossoming here. We saw a guy come into his own in a big way last season on a line that ranked among the best in the league. Now, can they still have that with somebody other than Spencer Brown at tackle? Maybe, but I really think with a back injury that he's dealing with and the history that he's had, the surgery there, it just bears watching. I'm not going to weigh in medically that I know anything more than what we're told as far as him, what the severity of it is, and you don't get much there. But when you don't see him out here, when they're playing it as safe as they are with it, it just makes you wonder. And I'm sorry, I can go back in my head, excuse me, of covering the NFL for nearly 50 years. Back injuries don't tend to settle down all the time or too quickly.
And he's not the biggest guy. Like, he's tall.
I'm having health issues.
He's tall, but he, to me, and we were discussing this, he's kind of like Eric Wood. You see some of these offensive linemen who are big guys, they immediately stop playing, and they look like not average guys, but they drop a lot of the weight. Yeah. And that's what makes Spencer Brown such a phenomenal athlete, is he was playing tight end at times early in his college career. And I just, the weight, it's not something where he's walking like Deion Dawkins. And Deion's just a big dude. It's not the same with Spencer Brown. And to your point, anyone who's had any sort of a back injury, a small tweak, or going up higher, any little thing can make it an issue here. And in his spot, it's been Tylen Grable, Ryan Vandemark. They've been in the system. You kind of know what they are. You're comfortable with them in relief, but not for a full season. And furthermore, Spencer Brown's the only one who started camp not practicing and on these lists who is you don't even see out there doing work. You're seeing Dawson Knox off the NFI. Laviska Shenault was on the field. You're seeing Dorian Williams. Tyrell Shavers, thankfully it's not serious. He was out here working on the jugs. All of these guys on this long list are out here doing something. The one guy we don't see is Spencer Brown.
One new addition to that list today also was Tyler Bass, and I thought that was interesting. Was described as soreness in the pelvic area, because I'm sure Tyler Bass would have wanted to be out here on the field to get the taste out of yesterday out of his mouth. A poor day for Tyler Bass. 4 out of 8 on field goals. There was a stretch where he missed 3 straight field goals, 50 yards and in. So I'm sure he would have loved to be out here in the first day of pads, make some kicks, and really get that taste out of his mouth. So we'll see if that's something where it prevents him. And this is a guy, remember, that's coming off a not-so-great season last year, missed 5 field goals, missed 5 extra points, a new special teams coordinator and this year and everything. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, because the struggles for Bass last year were really predicted in training camp because he didn't have a great training camp or preseason either.
Yeah, and this, whatever the issue is, pelvic type of issue that he's dealing with, soreness or whatever, could that be contributing? I mean, can we connect the dot there? It again, may or may not. It's not something he's talked about or the coaches have specified, or Sean McDermott has specified. But you're right. It's an important camp for him. It's an important season for him. And look, with kickers, if that reliability, dependability doesn't show up right away, I mean, one of two things can happen here. You can, maybe give him time to heal, because you got him under contract. I don't necessarily see moving away from him, but it won't stun any of us, I don't think, if another kicker is showing up, just to get that position filled, to make sure you've got, and I'm sure Brandon Beane's got his plan B, plan C, plan D at the kicking position, because you have to, and it's a vital role for a league and a team that's going to play a lot of close games. It's not going to be a lot of blowouts. That's not how NFL goes. Blowouts tend to be rare, and it's competitive. Even if the offense is putting up 30 or so, the opponent, you start with this Baltimore game. It could very easily be one of those higher scoring games that somebody's field goal kicker is going to win.
Nothing illustrated the state of injuries for the Buffalo Bills today than me seeing punter Brad Robbins lining up at wide receiver during an install period, because you had no Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore, Tyrell Shavers, and KJ Handler was on the side getting some work done. He did come back, so he was fine. But I'm like, 40 in a red jersey, what the heck is going on? Sure enough, he's out there with Josh Allen, so maybe
the more you can do.
Yeah, the more you can do, the more secure your roster spot is. Pads once again coming up on Tuesday morning here with Vic Carucci, Jonathan Acosta. I'm John Scott for Channel 2 Sports.